When my daughter sent me a wedding invitation with a note saying I wasn't invited to the ceremony, only the reception and please don't make a scene, I knew exactly what gift to give her. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Let me tell you how I went from excluded mother to the woman who gave my daughter the wedding gift she'd never forget. Because honey, this story has more plot twists than a soap opera marathon. 3 months ago, I was Catherine Monroe, proud mother of one spectacularly ungrateful daughter and widow of 2 years. When the cream-colored envelope arrived with my name written in elegant calligraphy, I actually felt hopeful. Maybe Sophia was finally including me in her life again. Maybe her upcoming wedding would be the bridge that reconnected us after years of growing distance. I should have known better. Inside was a formal invitation to Sophia Monroe and Bradford Wellington's wedding reception. Not the ceremony, just the reception. And paperclipped to the invitation was a handwritten note on Sophia's monogrammed stationery. Mom, Bradford's family has very specific expectations about the wedding ceremony. It would be easier for everyone if you just came to the reception. Please don't make this difficult. Love, Sophia, love, Sophia. As if those two words could soften the blow of being excluded from my only child's wedding ceremony. I read the note 3 times, each reading making the rejection clearer. Bradford's family has expectations. Translation, I wasn't good enough for the Wellingtons social circle. Please don't make this difficult. Translation, shut up and accept your place. I've been accepting my place for 5 years, ever since Sophia started dating Bradford Wellington III, heir to the Wellington Hotel empire and walking embodiment of old money privilege. At first, I'd been happy for her. Bradford seemed charming, successful, and genuinely interested in Sophia's career as an event planner. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, Sophia had begun changing. The daughter who'd grown up in our modest 3-bedroom house started making comments about how small everything was. The girl who'd loved our family traditions suddenly found them embarrassing. When Bradford's mother, Constance Wellington, entered the picture, the transformation accelerated. Sophia started dressing differently, speaking differently, even laughing differently. She was erasing every trace of Catherine Monroe's daughter and becoming the woman she thought the Wellingtons wanted. After my husband died, the distance became a chasm. Sophia had been sympathetic but distant during my grief. She'd helped arrange the funeral with the efficiency of someone planning a corporate event, then returned to her life with Bradford. Our weekly dinners became monthly phone calls. The monthly calls became occasional texts. Now apparently I wasn't even welcome at her wedding ceremony. I called her immediately. Sophia, we need to talk about this invitation. Mom, I'm in the middle of a meeting. Can this wait? No, it can't wait. You're excluding me from your wedding ceremony. There was a long pause, then Sophia's voice tight with frustration. Mom, it's not personal. Bradford's family has a very specific vision for the wedding. The ceremony is small, intimate, just immediate family and their closest friends. I'm not immediate family. You're my mother, of course you are, but the Wellingtons have traditions. The ceremony is at their private chapel with only 50 guests. It's been planned for months. 50 guests and your mother isn't one of them. Sophia sighed like I was being deliberately difficult. Mom, you're invited to the reception. That's where the real celebration happens. 500 guests, live band, dinner, dancing. You'll have a wonderful time. 500 strangers at a reception, but not 20 minutes at a ceremony to watch my daughter get married. Sophia, do you understand how hurtful this is? I understand that you're making this about you when it should be about me and Bradford. This is our wedding, our day, our decisions, and apparently your family doesn't include your mother. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, sweetheart. I learned that when my daughter decided I wasn't good enough for her new family. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking with anger and hurt. 43 years of marriage to a man I'd loved, raising a daughter I'd adored, working 2 jobs to help pay for her college education, and this was my reward. An invitation to the reception with a note asking me not to make a scene. For 3 days, I didn't answer Sophia's calls or texts. I needed time to process the rejection, to decide how to respond. Part of me wanted to skip the wedding entirely, to let Sophia celebrate with her precious Wellingtons without the embarrassment of her middle-class mother. But another part of me, the part that had fought through grief and loneliness after losing my husband, refused to be dismissed so easily. On the 4th day, I called my late husband's lawyer, Martin Chen. Martin had handled our estate planning and had become a friend over the years. When I explained the situation, his response was immediate. Catherine, that's despicable. What kind of daughter excludes her own mother from her wedding ceremony? The kind who's ashamed of where she came from, I said bitterly. Martin was quiet for a moment. Catherine, do you remember the trust your husband set up for Sophia? Of course. David had established a substantial trust fund for Sophia to be fully released on her wedding day. The trust was worth approximately $800,000, money David had carefully saved and invested over decades. That trust has specific conditions, Martin said. David included a clause that required Sophia to demonstrate respect and consideration for you as a condition of full release. I'd forgotten about that clause. David had insisted on including it, saying he wanted to ensure Sophia never took me for granted. At the time, I'd thought it was unnecessary. Now it felt prophetic. Martin, what exactly does that clause say? It states that if Sophia fails to treat you with appropriate respect and consideration, particularly during major life events, the trust can be modified or withheld at your discretion. Excluding you from her wedding ceremony would absolutely qualify. I felt something shift inside me. David had protected me even after his death, anticipating exactly the kind of situation I was now facing. What are my options? You could withhold the entire trust, release it with conditions, or modify the amount based on her behavior. The decision is entirely yours. I thought about Sophia, about the little girl who'd once thought I hung the moon, about the woman who now found me embarrassing. I thought about Bradford and his family, about their expectations and traditions that didn't include room for Catherine Monroe. And I thought about David, who'd loved us both but had been wise enough to protect me from being discarded. Martin, I want to make some changes to that trust. What kind of changes? The kind that will teach my daughter a lesson she desperately needs to learn. Over the next hour, Martin and I restructured Sophia's trust fund. The modifications were legal, ironclad, and absolutely devastating. When we finished, Martin looked at me with something like admiration. Catherine, are you absolutely certain about this? Sophia is going to be furious. She's already furious that I exist, Martin. At least this way my existence will mean something. 2 weeks before the wedding, I received a call from Constance Wellington herself. Catherine, darling, we need to discuss your attire for the reception. I'd never been called darling by Constance Wellington, and I'd certainly never received fashion advice from her. This should be interesting. The reception has a very specific aesthetic, Constance continued. Champagne and gold tones, formal but not ostentatious. I've taken the liberty of having my personal shopper select some appropriate options for you. How thoughtful. Constance missed my sarcasm entirely. I'll have them sent to your address. We can't have you feeling out of place at such an important event. Out of place. As if my presence itself was the problem, not their exclusion of me from the ceremony. Mrs. Wellington, I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly capable of selecting my own attire. Catherine, please, call me Constance, and I insist. Bradford has told me so much about your financial situation since David's passing. Let me do this for you, my financial situation. Sophia had told the Wellingtons that I was struggling financially, painting me as some charity case who needed their assistance. The truth was that David had left me very comfortable, but Sophia had apparently decided that reality didn't fit her narrative. Constance, that won't be necessary. I have something perfect already planned. After hanging up, I looked at the dress hanging in my closet. I'd purchased it the day after my conversation with Martin, spending more money than I'd ever spent on a single garment. It was stunning, inappropriate for a mother of the bride at a Wellington wedding, and absolutely perfect for what I had planned. The wedding reception was held at the Wellington estate, a sprawling property that looked like something from a period drama. I arrived exactly on time, wearing my spectacular dress and carrying a large, elegantly wrapped gift box. The valet's eyes widened when he saw me, but he maintained professional composure. Inside, the reception was everything Sophia had described. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, 500 guests in formal attire, and an orchestra playing classical music. It was beautiful, expensive, and completely devoid of any personality that reminded me of my daughter. This was a Wellington production, and Sophia was just playing her assigned role. I spotted her across the room, wearing a wedding dress that probably cost more than my first car. She looked beautiful and completely transformed. This wasn't the girl I'd raised. This was Constance Wellington's protégé, Bradford's suitable wife, the woman Sophia had decided she needed to become. When she saw me, her expression flickered between surprise and concern. I was clearly not wearing anything Constance's personal shopper had selected. My dress was bold, elegant, and definitely not champagne or gold. It was deep emerald green, and it made a statement. I was here, I mattered, and I refused to disappear into their carefully planned aesthetic. Mom, Sophia approached with Bradford at her side. You look lovely. That dress is certainly eye-catching. Thank you, sweetheart. I wanted to make sure I didn't fade into the background. This is your special day, after all, even if I wasn't important enough to witness the actual ceremony. Bradford shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Monroe, you understand that the chapel has very limited capacity. We had to make difficult choices about the guest list. Of course, Bradford, I understand completely. Some people make the cut, others don't. I'm just glad I made the reception list. Sophia's jaw tightened. Mom, please don't do this here. Do what, darling? Acknowledge reality. I'm simply grateful to be included in any part of your celebration. Bradford, looking desperate to escape, excused himself to greet other guests. Sophia grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly firm. What are you doing? I asked innocently. What am I doing? You're the one making passive-aggressive comments in the middle of my wedding reception. I'm just being honest, Sophia. Something you apparently struggle with, considering you told the Wellingtons I'm financially struggling. Her face flushed. I never said that. Your mother-in-law called to offer me charity clothing because she heard about my financial situation. Where would she get that impression? Sophia looked away. Bradford might have mentioned that things have been tight for you since Dad died. Things have been tight. I have more money in investments than Bradford probably makes in a year, but you needed me to be poor to justify your embarrassment of me. That's not true, isn't it? You've been erasing me from your life for 5 years, Sophia. This wedding is just the final step. Before she could respond, Constance Wellington appeared with the wedding planner. Sophia, darling, it's time for the gift presentation. We've arranged everything in the ballroom. The gift presentation was apparently another Wellington tradition. Guests had been instructed to place their gifts on elaborate tables in the ballroom where they'd be opened and acknowledged before dinner. It was showy, tacky, and exactly the kind of thing the Wellingtons would consider classy. I followed the crowd into the ballroom, carrying my large gift box. The tables were covered with presents, clearly expensive items wrapped in designer paper. My emerald green box stood out among the champagne and gold wrapping paper that guests had obviously coordinated. Sophia and Bradford took their positions at the front of the room while the wedding planner began presenting gifts. Each present was opened, acknowledged, and described to the assembled guests. Crystal vases from the Vanderbilts, a vintage wine collection from the Astors, artwork, jewelry, luxury vacation packages. The Wellington social circle clearly believed in impressive gifts. When they reached my gift, Sophia hesitated. The box was large, professionally wrapped, and gave no indication of its contents. She looked at me across the room, and I smiled encouragingly. Bradford lifted the box, surprised by its weight, and began unwrapping it carefully. Inside was a leather-bound book, beautifully crafted and clearly expensive. Sophia opened it, her expression confused. The first page contained a formal letter on law firm letterhead. As she began reading, the color drained from her face. "What is it?" Bradford asked, leaning over her shoulder. His expression shifted from curiosity to shock as he read the document. Sophia looked up at me, her eyes wide with disbelief and growing anger. The wedding planner, oblivious to the tension, announced cheerfully, "And this gift is from the bride's mother, Catherine Monroe." What a beautiful book. "It's not just a book," Sophia said, her voice barely controlled. "It's a legal document." The room went quiet, 500 guests suddenly very interested in what was happening. Constance Wellington moved closer, her social radar detecting a problem. "What kind of legal document, darling?" Sophia's hands were shaking as she held the book. "It's the modification of my trust fund. My late husband's trust fund for Sophia, the one he established to be released on her wedding day." Bradford was reading the document now, his face growing increasingly pale. "Mrs. Monroe, this can't be legal." "It's completely legal," I assured him. My lawyer confirmed every detail. Sophia, still reading, looked like she might be sick. "You're withholding the entire trust?" "Not withholding, sweetheart, redirecting. The trust fund, all $800,000, has been redirected to establish the David Monroe Foundation for Family Values. It will provide scholarships for students from working-class families, the kind of families you're apparently ashamed to come from." The room erupted in whispers. Constance Wellington looked horrified, not at what I'd done, but at the scene unfolding at her carefully planned event. Sophia's voice rose, cracking with emotion. "You're punishing me for my wedding guest list. I'm teaching you that actions have consequences. Your father included a clause in that trust requiring you to treat me with respect and consideration. Excluding me from your wedding ceremony, lying about my financial situation, and asking me not to make a scene doesn't qualify as respectful treatment." Bradford stepped forward, his corporate negotiation skills activating. "Mrs. Monroe, surely we can discuss this privately and reach a reasonable compromise." "There's nothing to discuss, Bradford. The trust has been legally modified, the paperwork is filed, the foundation is established. This book contains all the details, including the scholarship criteria and selection process." Sophia was crying now, mascara running down her carefully made-up face. "How could you do this to me? On my wedding day? How could you exclude me from your wedding ceremony? On the day I was supposed to watch my only daughter get married? You made a choice about what kind of relationship we'd have, Sophia. I'm simply responding to that choice." Constance finally found her voice. "This is completely inappropriate. Catherine, I must ask you to leave. This is a private family event." I looked at her, this woman who'd helped my daughter erase me from her life. "You're absolutely right, Constance. This is a family event, which is why it's so painful that I wasn't considered family enough to attend the ceremony." I turned to leave, but Sophia's voice stopped me. "Mom, wait, please, we can fix this, we can talk about this, can we? Because I've been trying to talk to you for 5 years, and you've been too busy becoming someone else to listen. The trust modification stands, Sophia. Maybe someday you'll understand why." As I walked out of the ballroom, I heard the chaos erupting behind me. Sophia sobbing, Bradford trying to calm her, Constance demanding someone do something, and 500 guests whispering about the most dramatic wedding gift in Wellington family history. I felt no satisfaction, only a deep sadness that it had come to this. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages. Sophia had called 17 times, Bradford had left multiple voicemails. Even Constance Wellington had texted asking for a meeting to discuss the situation rationally. I ignored them all and drove to Martin Chen's office. "Catherine, you're all over social media," Martin said, showing me his phone. Someone had filmed the gift presentation and posted it online. The video had millions of views, with comments ranging from supportive to horrified. "You're either a hero for standing up to entitled children or a monster for ruining your daughter's wedding." I watched the video, seeing myself walk out of the ballroom while Sophia cried. It looked cruel, calculated, and completely justified depending on your perspective. "Martin, did I do the right thing?" He considered the question carefully. "You did what your husband wanted. David included that clause specifically to protect you from being taken for granted. Whether it was right or wrong, it was your decision to make. But there's something you should know." "What?" "Sophia's lawyers have contacted me. They're threatening to contest the trust modification." "On what grounds?" "They're claiming undue influence, that you manipulated David into including that clause when he was ill." "David wasn't ill when he created that trust. He was perfectly healthy and completely competent. I know that, and we have documentation proving it. But they're desperate, Catherine. $800,000 is a lot of money to lose. Let them contest it. Every legal filing, every court appearance, every piece of evidence will just reinforce why David included that protection in the first place." Over the next week, the story continued growing. News outlets picked it up, framing it as either a story about entitled millennials or cruel parents. I received interview requests from dozens of media organizations. Some wanted to vilify me, others wanted to celebrate me, but all of them wanted to profit from my family's dysfunction. I agreed to one interview with a local news station, primarily to set the record straight. The interviewer, a sharp woman named Jessica Torres, didn't pull punches. "Mrs. Monroe, critics say you ruined your daughter's wedding out of spite. Is that accurate?" I ruined a gift presentation, not a wedding. Sophia had already gotten married in a ceremony I wasn't invited to attend. The wedding was over before I ever gave her that gift. But the timing seems deliberately cruel. The timing was deliberate, yes. I wanted Sophia to understand the consequences of her choices at the exact moment she was celebrating those choices. You don't think excluding you from the ceremony justified withholding $800,000? I think excluding me from the ceremony revealed exactly the kind of person Sophia has become. Someone who values social status over family relationships. The trust modification was simply acknowledging that reality. What do you say to people who think you're being vindictive? I say they don't know what it's like to be erased by their own child. To watch someone you raised and loved decide you're not good enough for their new life. Vindictive would be destroying Sophia's life. Educational is teaching her that disrespecting family has consequences. The interview aired that evening and went viral immediately. Public opinion started shifting in my favor, particularly among older viewers who'd experienced similar rejection from adult children. I received hundreds of messages from parents who'd been excluded, dismissed, or discarded by children who'd moved up in the world. But I also received a message that surprised me. It was from Bradford Wellington's father, Bradford Wellington Jr., requesting a private meeting. We met at a quiet restaurant downtown, far from the Wellington social circle. Bradford SR was nothing like I'd expected. Instead of the pompous aristocrat I'd imagined, he was thoughtful, direct, and surprisingly sympathetic. "Mrs. Monroe, I want to apologize for my family's behavior. I was unaware that you'd been excluded from the ceremony until after the reception. That was wrong. Thank you, but you're not responsible for your son's choices. Perhaps not, but I'm responsible for the environment that made him think such choices were acceptable. My wife has very specific ideas about social propriety and appropriate associations. I've allowed those ideas to poison my children's values." He pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "I've been doing some research into your late husband's career. David Monroe was an impressive man, self-made, ethical, successful on his own terms. Exactly the kind of person my son should admire rather than dismiss. I don't understand. Bradford and Sophia's marriage is built on a foundation of superficiality and social climbing. That's not a stable foundation. I've seen too many marriages in our social circle collapse under the weight of their own pretensions. I'm trying to prevent that for my son. What are you proposing? I'm proposing that you consider a compromise on the trust fund. Not because Sophia deserves it, but because Bradford needs to learn that money isn't the solution to every problem." The folder contained a detailed proposal. Bradford SR wanted to match the trust fund amount, creating a second $800,000 fund for the David Monroe Foundation. In exchange, I would restore half of Sophia's original trust, with strict conditions about family relationships and annual reviews. This is very generous, but why would you do this? Because my son is about to learn a very expensive lesson about respecting his wife's family. I'd rather he learn it in a way that also does some good in the world. Your husband's foundation will help deserving students. That's worth supporting. I studied the proposal carefully. It was fair, generous, and would actually increase the foundation's impact, but it also felt like letting Sophia off too easily. "Mr. Wellington, I appreciate this offer, but Sophia needs to understand that her choices have permanent consequences." He nodded. "I agree, which is why my proposal includes those conditions. Sophia will have to earn back your trust, literally and figuratively. She'll have to demonstrate genuine change, not just apologize because money is at stake. And if she can't do that, the foundation keeps everything." I took the folder home and spent 3 days reviewing every detail with Martin. The proposal was legally sound, financially beneficial for the foundation, and included enough safeguards to ensure Sophia couldn't just perform temporary good behavior to reclaim her inheritance. But before I made any decision, I needed to talk to Sophia. Not the angry, hurt version of me who'd walked out of her reception, but the mother who still remembered the little girl who'd once loved me unconditionally. I called her and asked her to meet me at the house where she'd grown up, the house I still owned and she'd once called home. She arrived looking exhausted, her usual polish dimmed by stress and sleepless nights. We sat in the kitchen where I'd made her breakfast for 18 years, and for the first time in months, we actually looked at each other. Really looked, without the Wellington expectations or the social performance or the anger. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." "Sophia, sorry isn't enough. I need to understand why. Why you excluded me, why you lied about me, why you became someone I don't recognize." She started crying, real tears this time, not the performative emotion of the reception. "Because I was ashamed, not of you but of myself, of where I came from, of not being born into the world Bradford lives in. You were ashamed of being middle class, of being normal. I was ashamed of feeling inferior. Every time I met Bradford's friends, every Wellington family dinner, every social event, I felt like an imposter, like someone pretending to belong in a world that wasn't mine. So I tried to erase everything that made me feel that way, including your mother, including you, yes, and that was unforgivable. I convinced myself that if I could just be perfect enough, Wellington enough, nobody would notice I didn't belong. but the more I tried, the more I lost myself. Sophia, you belonged in that world because Bradford chose you, because you're talented and intelligent and worthy. You didn't need to erase your history to deserve your present. I know that now, or at least I'm starting to understand it. Losing the trust fund, seeing the public reaction, watching Bradford's father apologize for my behavior, it's made me realize what I've become. I pulled out Bradford SR's proposal and explained the offer. Sophia listened quietly, her expression shifting from hope to understanding to something like resignation. So I can earn back half the trust if I prove I've changed. That's the offer, yes, but Sophia, I need you to understand something. This isn't about the money. This is about whether we can rebuild a relationship based on honesty and mutual respect. Can we? I don't know. That depends on whether you're willing to do the work. Real work, not just performing good behavior until you get your inheritance. I'm willing to try, but Mom, I need you to understand something too. I can't just walk away from Bradford and his family. I love him and I've built a life with him. I'm not asking you to walk away from your life, Sophia. I'm asking you to stop walking away from mine. There's room for both the Wellingtons and the Monroes in your world if you're brave enough to claim that space. She nodded slowly. What do I need to do? Over the next hour, we outlined what genuine change would look like. Weekly dinners, not monthly phone calls. Honest conversations about her life and mine, including me in family decisions, not just informing me after the fact. And most importantly, never again allowing anyone, including Bradford's family, to treat me as less than. I also need you to do something else, I said. I need you to volunteer with the foundation. Not for publicity or to check a box, but to actually meet the students we're helping, to remember what it was like to work for what you have instead of inheriting it. Sophia agreed to everything. Whether she'd follow through remained to be seen, but for the first time since her engagement, I saw glimpses of my daughter underneath the Wellington veneer. I accepted Bradford SR's proposal with modifications. Sophia would have access to $400,000, but it would be distributed over 10 years contingent on demonstrated change in her behavior and our relationship. The foundation would receive the matching $800,000 immediately, plus the other $400,000 from Sophia's original trust. If Sophia failed to meet the conditions, her remaining funds would also go to the foundation. The legal proceedings that Sophia's lawyers had threatened quietly disappeared. Bradford SR made it clear to his son that contesting the trust would result in his own trust fund being reevaluated. Apparently, Bradford Jr. had his own concerns about his children's values and was willing to use financial leverage to address them. The media coverage eventually faded, replaced by newer scandals and more dramatic family conflicts. But the David Monroe Foundation continued growing, funded by my husband's foresight and my daughter's expensive lesson in humility. We awarded our first scholarship 6 months after the wedding, and I made sure Sophia attended the ceremony. Watching her interact with the scholarship recipients, I saw something shift in her expression. These students reminded her of who she'd been: ambitious, hardworking, and hungry for opportunities. One young woman, the first in her family to attend college, reminded Sophia so much of herself that she started crying. Not performative Wellington tears, but genuine emotion at recognizing her own journey in someone else's struggle. After the ceremony, Sophia approached me quietly. Mom, thank you for this. For the foundation, for the second chance, for not giving up on me completely. I haven't given up on you, Sophia. But I'm also not going to pretend the past 5 years didn't happen. We're rebuilding from honesty, not pretending everything is fine. I know, and I'm grateful for that. Bradford and I have been in counseling, working on our relationship and my issues with his family. It's hard, but it's necessary. How's that going? Constance is not thrilled that I'm setting boundaries, but Bradford supports me and his father has been surprisingly helpful. Bradford SR had apparently decided that his daughter-in-law's backbone was more valuable than his wife's social approval. He'd been coaching Sophia on how to navigate Wellington family dynamics without losing herself in the process. It was an unexpected alliance, but an effective one. A year after the wedding, Sophia and I had dinner at my house. Just the two of us, no Bradford, no Wellington expectations, no performance. We cooked together, something we hadn't done in years, and talked honestly about everything that had happened. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you regret it? The gift, the public humiliation, all of it? I thought about the question carefully. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that our relationship had deteriorated to the point where such a dramatic intervention was required. But do I regret forcing you to confront the consequences of your choices? No, that's fair. Sophia stirred the pasta sauce, her movements unconsciously mimicking the way I'd taught her years ago. I regret everything, Mom, every choice that led to that moment. Every time I chose Wellington approval over your feelings. Every lie I told myself about why excluding you is acceptable. Regret is easy, Sophia. Change is hard, I know, which is why I wanted to show you something. She pulled out her phone and showed me a text conversation with Constance Wellington. Sophia had declined a Wellington family event because it conflicted with our weekly dinner. Constance's response was cold, disappointed, and manipulative. Sophia's response was firm, respectful, and uncompromising. You chose our dinner over a Wellington event. I chose my relationship with you over my mother-in-law's expectations. That's the change you asked for, right? It's a start. But Sophia, you need to make these choices because you value our relationship, not because you're trying to earn back your trust fund. Mom, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. I want you to redirect my remaining trust fund to the foundation, all of it. I stared at her, shocked. Sophia, that's $400,000, I know, but I don't need it. Bradford and I are doing well financially, and honestly, the foundation does more good with that money than I ever would. This isn't about proving something to me, it's about proving something to myself. That I'm not the person who valued money over relationships, that I've actually learned something from the most expensive lesson of my life. I studied my daughter's face looking for signs of performance or manipulation, but all I saw was genuine conviction and something like peace. Are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. Dad created that trust to take care of me, but the best way to honor his memory is to help other people the way he helped our family. Let's use it to change lives instead of fund my already comfortable lifestyle. We modified the trust agreement again, this time with Sophia's full participation and enthusiastic support. The David Monroe Foundation's endowment grew to over $1.6 million, enough to fund scholarships in perpetuity. Sophia joined the foundation board and became actively involved in student selection and mentorship. Bradford, surprisingly, also became involved. His financial expertise helped us maximize the foundation's investment returns, and his connections opened doors for scholarship recipients seeking internships and career opportunities. The Wellingtons, it turned out, could be valuable allies when properly motivated. 2 years after the wedding, Sophia called me with news. Mom, I'm pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother. The joy I felt was complicated by immediate concern. How would Sophia navigate motherhood while maintaining the boundaries she'd worked so hard to establish? Would the Wellingtons try to control her parenting the way they'd controlled her wedding? Sophia seemed to read my thoughts. Bradford and I have already discussed this. Our child will know both sides of their family equally, Wellington traditions and Monroe values. No exclusions, no hierarchies, no choosing one family over the other. That sounds healthy. It sounds terrifying, honestly. Constance is already making plans for the baby's christening at the Wellington Chapel, but I'm standing firm. Our child, our decisions. I'm proud of you, Sophia. Thanks, Mom. I learned from the best, even if it took me way too long to appreciate the lesson. When my granddaughter was born, I was in the delivery room alongside Bradford. Constance had expected to be there instead of me, but Sophia had firmly explained that her mother took priority. The Wellington matriarch was not pleased, but she was learning to accept that Sophia's family dynamics had permanently shifted. Little Catherine, named after me and my late husband, was christened in a ceremony that blended Wellington and Monroe traditions. The service was held at the Wellington Chapel, but the reception was at my house with both families equally represented. Constance wore her disappointment like an expensive accessory, but Bradford S.R. winked at me across the room, clearly pleased with his daughter-in-law's diplomatic solution. At the reception, Sophia pulled me aside. Mom, I want to show you something. She handed me a leather-bound book similar to the one I'd given her at her wedding. Inside was a letter addressed to Catherine to be opened on her 18th birthday. It explained Sophia's journey, the mistakes she'd made, the lessons she'd learned, and the gift I'd given her that had changed everything. Someday, Sophia had written, you'll understand that the greatest gifts aren't always wrapped in pretty paper. Sometimes they come wrapped in hard truths and difficult consequences. Your grandmother taught me that, and I hope I can teach you the same lesson with more grace and less drama. I cried reading it, not from sadness but from recognition. This was my daughter, the woman she'd become after being forced to confront who she'd been. Sophia, this is beautiful, it's honest. That's what you taught me, Mom. That honesty, even painful honesty, is more valuable than comfortable lies. The David Monroe Foundation continued growing, funding dozens of scholarships each year. Sophia remained actively involved, and Bradford's financial guidance helped us expand our reach. We started offering mentorship programs, career counseling, and networking opportunities for our scholars. The foundation became exactly what David had hoped, a lasting legacy that reflected our family's values. 3 years after the wedding, a journalist contacted me about writing a book about family financial dynamics and the weaponization of inheritance. She'd followed my story from the beginning and believed it illustrated important issues about elder respect, family manipulation, and the corrupting influence of wealth. I agreed to participate, but only if Sophia could tell her side of the story as well. The book, titled The Gift of Consequences, became a surprising bestseller. It resonated with families across economic spectrums who struggled with similar dynamics. Sophia and I did joint interviews, speaking honestly about our broken relationship and difficult reconciliation. We didn't pretend everything was perfect, but we demonstrated that genuine change was possible. Constance Wellington hated the book naturally. It portrayed the Wellington family dynamics in an unflattering light and suggested that their social climbing had nearly destroyed her son's marriage. But Bradford S.R. bought copies for his entire family, insisting they read it as a cautionary tale about valuing status over substance. On the 5th anniversary of the wedding, Sophia organized a celebration, not of her marriage, though that was still going strong, but of the foundation. We gathered all our scholarship recipients, board members, and supporters for an evening recognizing the impact we'd made. 50 students had received full scholarships. Dozens more had benefited from our mentorship programs. Lives had been changed, families had been lifted, and David's legacy lived on in tangible, meaningful ways. Sophia gave a speech that night, standing in front of everyone who'd been touched by the foundation. 5 years ago, she began, I made the worst mistake of my life. I excluded my mother from my wedding ceremony because I was ashamed of where I came from. In response, she gave me a gift that changed everything. She held up the leather-bound book I'd given her at the reception. This book contained the legal documents redirecting my inheritance to create this foundation. At the time, I thought it was the cruelest thing anyone had ever done to me. Now I understand it was the greatest gift I ever received. The room was silent as Sophia continued. My mother taught me that love sometimes means letting people face the consequences of their choices, that enabling bad behavior isn't kindness, it's cowardice, and that the most valuable inheritance isn't money, it's values. Everything we've accomplished through this foundation exists because my mother loved me enough to let me fail. I watched my daughter speak, seeing the woman she'd become. Not the social climber who'd excluded me from her wedding, not the Wellington wife who'd valued status over substance, but a mother, philanthropist, and advocate who understood that privilege came with responsibility. She'd earned back more than her trust fund. She'd earned back herself. After the celebration, Sophia and I sat together watching Catherine play with the other children. Bradford was deep in conversation with Bradford SR about expanding the foundation's reach. Constance was actually smiling, having finally accepted that her daughter-in-law's family was a permanent part of her grandchild's life. Mom, Sophia said quietly, do you think Dad would be proud of what we've built? I think your father would be amazed. He protected me with that trust clause, but I don't think he imagined it would lead to all this. The foundation, our reconciliation, the lives we've changed. This is beyond anything he could have planned, but he made it possible. He knew exactly what kind of person I might become, and he gave you the tools to save me from myself. That's the greatest gift a father could give. We sat in comfortable silence, watching our family, both Wellington and Monroe, mingling without hierarchy or pretension. It had taken a public humiliation, a redirected inheritance, and years of difficult work, but we'd built something real. My phone buzzed with a message from Martin Chen. Catherine just saw the foundation celebration photos. David would be so proud. You turned a family crisis into a legacy. Tell Sophia she's become quite the philanthropist. I showed Sophia the message and she smiled. You know what's funny? I spent years trying to become someone the Wellingtons would respect. But I only became someone I could respect after you forced me to face who I'd become. That's the thing about consequences, sweetheart. They're not punishment, they're mirrors. They show us who we really are when the pretense is stripped away. And sometimes, if we're brave enough to look, we discover we're better than we thought, or worse than we hoped, which is what I needed to see. The evening ended with Catherine falling asleep in my arms, exhausted from playing. Sophia watched us, her expression soft. She's lucky to have you as her grandmother. You'll teach her things I never could. We'll teach her together. Wellington polish and Monroe substance. She'll need both to navigate the world. As I drove home that night, I thought about the journey from that devastating wedding invitation to this moment of family unity. The path had been painful, public, and permanently altered all of us, but it had also been necessary. Without that dramatic intervention, Sophia might never have confronted her transformation into someone she didn't recognize. Our relationship might have continued deteriorating until nothing remained but polite distance and holiday obligations. Instead, we'd built something stronger than what we'd lost. Not the uncomplicated love of mother and young daughter, but the complex, hard-won respect of two women who'd fought for their relationship and won. The foundation ensured that our struggle had meaning beyond our family, that other families might benefit from the expensive lessons we'd learned. I still have the video of the gift presentation, the moment that went viral and changed everything. Sometimes I watch it, seeing the shock on Sophia's face, the chaos in the ballroom, my own determined walk away from the destruction. It looks cruel in the video, calculated and cold, but I know the truth, it was love. Fierce, uncompromising, refuse to enable your self-destruction love. The kind of love that risks everything, including the relationship itself, to save the person you love from their worst instincts. David had shown me that love by including the protection clause in Sophia's trust. I'd shown Sophia that love by enforcing it. And Sophia was now showing Catherine that love by raising her with both Wellington resources and Monroe values. 6 years after the wedding, I received an unexpected call from a woman named Patricia Thornton. She'd read our book and wanted to share her story. Her daughter had excluded her from important family events, manipulated her financially, and treated her with increasing disrespect. Patricia was considering using her own inheritance leverage to force a confrontation. We met for coffee and I listened to her story. It was heartbreakingly familiar. The slow erosion of respect, the social climbing daughter, the enabling mother afraid to set boundaries. Patricia wanted my advice about whether to follow my example. Should she use financial consequences to force her daughter to change? Patricia, I said carefully, what I did worked for my family, but every situation is different. You need to be prepared for the possibility that your daughter won't change, that she'll choose her pride over your relationship, that you'll lose her permanently. Are you prepared for that? She considered the question. I don't know, but I do know I can't continue being treated this way. I'm not asking for gratitude or constant attention. I just want basic respect and inclusion in my daughter's life. Is that too much to ask? It's not too much to ask, but sometimes asking isn't enough. Sometimes you have to demand, and demanding comes with risks. We talked for 2 hours about strategies, consequences, and the emotional cost of confronting adult children. I didn't tell her what to do, but I helped her think through her options and potential outcomes. Whether she followed through was her decision, but at least she'd make it with clear eyes about the risks and rewards. After Patricia left, I called Sophia and told her about the conversation. Mom, do you ever regret how public our situation became? Do you wish you'd handled it more privately? Sometimes. The publicity was never the goal. It was just a consequence of doing something dramatic at a public event, but I can't regret the outcome. Our reconciliation, the foundation, the lives we've changed, that's worth the embarrassment. What would you tell Patricia? I'd tell her that love sometimes requires courage more than kindness, that protecting your dignity isn't selfish, it's necessary, and that the hardest gift you can give someone is the truth about how their behavior affects you. Even if they hate you for it initially, that's what you gave me. And I did hate you for it initially, but now I understand it was the only thing that could have broken through my delusions. Anything gentler I would have dismissed or manipulated my way around. You gave me no choice but to confront who I'd become. The David Monroe Foundation celebrated its 10th anniversary last month. We've now funded over 200 scholarships and helped countless students achieve dreams their families thought impossible. Sophia serves as executive director, Bradford handles our investments, and I chair the board. Even Constance Wellington occasionally volunteers, though she still can't quite hide her discomfort around students from working-class backgrounds. Catherine is 8 now, smart, kind, and blissfully unaware of the family drama that preceded her birth. She knows her grandmother Monroe and her grandmother Wellington, and she loves them both without understanding the complicated history between our families. Someday we'll tell her the full story, but for now she just knows that family is important and that her mother and I are very close. At the anniversary celebration, a young woman approached me. Mrs. Monroe, I wanted to thank you personally. I was your first scholarship recipient and I'm graduating medical school next month. Your foundation changed my life. These moments make everything worthwhile. The public humiliation, the family conflict, the years of difficult reconciliation. This young doctor exists because I refused to let my daughter erase me without consequences. Sophia joined us and the young woman hugged her. Thank you both for believing in students like me, for understanding that potential exists everywhere, not just in families with the right last names or social connections. That's exactly what my husband believed, I told her. That talent and ambition deserve support regardless of background. You're proof he was right. After she left, Sophia linked her arm through mine. Mom, I've been thinking about something. What's that, sweetheart? I want to endow a special scholarship in your name. The Catherine Monroe Award for mothers returning to education. For women who postpone their dreams to raise families and are ready to pursue them now. Sophia, that's a wonderful idea. But why? Because you postponed your education for me and Dad. You worked to put me through college instead of finishing your own degree. I want to honor that sacrifice by helping other women complete their interrupted educations. I felt tears forming. You don't need to honor my sacrifices, Sophia. Being your mother was never a sacrifice. Maybe not to you, but I'm a mother now and I understand what you gave up. I see Catherine's future, all the opportunities she'll have, and I realize those opportunities exist partly because you gave up yours. Let me do this, Mom. Let me turn your sacrifice into someone else's opportunity. We established the Catherine Monroe Award the following year, funding education for mothers returning to school. The first recipient was a 45-year-old woman who'd raised 4 children and dreamed of becoming a teacher. Watching her accept the award, I saw myself as I might have been if circumstances had been different. It was healing in ways I hadn't expected. Now, sitting in my study, I look at the photographs covering my walls. Sophia's wedding, where everything fell apart. The foundation's first scholarship ceremony, where everything began healing. Catherine's christening, where both families came together. Graduation photos of students we've helped. Each image tells part of the story of how a family broke and rebuilt itself stronger. The leather-bound book I gave Sophia at her wedding sits on my desk. It's worn now, handled frequently as Sophia shows it to foundation donors and shares our story. Inside the front cover, she's written an inscription. To Mom, who loved me enough to let me fail and strong enough to help me rise. This gift changed everything. Thank you for not giving up on me. I never gave up on you, sweetheart, I told her when I first saw the inscription. I gave up on the version of you that was destroying our relationship, but I never stopped hoping the real you would come back. She did come back, changed, humbled, but genuinely transformed. And in the process, she helped create something bigger than either of us. A foundation that will outlive us both, helping families for generations. My daughter's luxury wedding did exclude me, and I did send her a gift that stunned everyone. But the real gift wasn't the legal documents or the redirected inheritance. The real gift was refusing to disappear, demanding respect, and showing Sophia that love sometimes means enforcing consequences rather than offering endless forgiveness. Would I do it again, knowing everything I know now? Absolutely. Because the alternative was watching my daughter become someone unrecognizable while I quietly accepted my diminishing role in her life. Instead, I forced a confrontation that saved our relationship and created a legacy that honors my husband's memory. To anyone facing similar situations, wondering whether to confront disrespectful adult children or quietly accept mistreatment, I offer this advice. Love doesn't mean accepting abuse. Respect must flow both directions. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the full consequences of their choices, even if it breaks both your hearts temporarily. Sophia and I are closer now than we've been in 15 years, not despite the confrontation but because of it. We built our current relationship on honesty, mutual respect, and the understanding that neither of us will tolerate the behavior that nearly destroyed our family. It's not the uncomplicated relationship we had when she was young, but it's real, honest, and worth fighting for. The David Monroe Foundation continues growing, touching lives my husband never met, solving problems he never imagined. His legacy lives on not in the money he accumulated, but in the values he instilled and protected. He knew his daughter might need tough love someday, and he gave me the tools to provide it. So yes, my daughter's luxury wedding excluded me. And yes, I sent her a gift that stunned everyone and went viral across social media. But that moment of public drama became the catalyst for private transformation. Sometimes the gifts that look cruelest in the moment turn out to be the most valuable in the long run. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and share your story in the comments. Your voice matters, and your experiences might help someone else find the courage to demand the respect they deserve.